Hello, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a video form of a three-part blog post which I wrote in January and February of 2018 about writing about ice skating and historical fiction because I love the sport of figure skating, and we're currently now in the Winter Olympics. I could do so many different videos and blog posts and stuff about my love for the sport of skating, but since my channel is primarily booktube and authortube related, I felt this was the most on-topic thing I could talk about. Like if you're doing a scene with figure skating in your historical novel, or your characters are skaters, or you're interested in books about skaters or things like that, I thought that would be a very good, appropriate fit for this time of year and with the Olympics. So let's get on with it. Humans have been ice skating since at least 3000 BCE, as evidenced by animal bone skating shoes found in present-day Russia and Scandinavia. The first written record of skating came in the 12th century, describing children in Canterbury, England, playing on the ice with animal bones attached to their boots, because we obviously didn't have ice skates in the way we knew them in those days. You had to do other things to skate around on frozen water. Edges came in the 13th or 14th century. By whom else but the skate-loving Dutch? For the first time, the blades attached to footwear were steel instead of bone. About the same time, blades took on proportions very close to their modern ones. Skating first appeared in artwork in the 15th century, depicting the Dutch Saint Lidwina, patron saint of ice skaters, falling on the ice. This fall broke her leg and left her progressively disabled for life. Then as now, the Dutch people loved ice skating. Historical records and artwork testified to people from all walks of life enjoying the winter sport. Many people also skated as a means of transportation, since connecting waterways were often frozen for months. In other places, only members of the upper classes were allowed to learn to skate. Skating came to France during the reign of Louis XVI, and Emperor Rudolph II of the Holy Roman Empire loved it so much. A large ice carnival was built in his court in 1610 to popularize it. Skating slowly began taking on its modern form in the 18th century. In 1742, the Edinburgh Skating Club became the very first ice skating association, and in 1772, the very first instructional book, a treatise on skating, was published by Robert Jones in London. Jones, a former artillery lieutenant, was instrumental in popularizing ice skating in Great Britain. Sadly, his book was published the same year as a high-profile trial in which he was convicted of sodomizing a 12-year-old boy several times. His death sentence was commuted by King George III on condition he leave Britain forever. Jones's book was intended only for men, as British women typically didn't ice skate in that era, even with all the jumps we expect today. This book also split ice skating into its two main forms, figure skating and speed skating. The next major development was the opening of several skating ponds in Central Park in Manhattan, New York City. This became the highlight of the winter social scene for the upper classes. The first skating pond opened in 1858 and reignited New Yorkers' interest in the sport. Earlier skating ponds downtown had long since been built over, because if you know anything about the history of Manhattan, the city, or the borough, developed really, really deep downtown, and only gradually over time it began spreading farther and farther uptown and then getting into the other different boroughs. So basically it was kind of really undeveloped, Wild West, beautiful forest and stuff, and what we would now consider Upper West Side and Upper East Side and things like that. So it was just a totally much different landscape in those days in the 19th century, and they had a lot more room to have large, skating ponds and things around it. It wasn't just, packed wall-to-wall townhouses and apartment buildings like we think about the city, the borough today. People who didn't live within walking distance took carriages and horse-drawn railway cars. Sex segregation quickly disappeared, and skating became one of the few things single men and women could do together unchaperoned. The sport's growing popularity led to further skating ponds in Brooklyn, Staten Island, Jersey City, and Hoboken. In 1863, the Skating Club of New York was founded. Park commissioners opened the ponds when 4 to 5 inches of ice had built up. When they felt it was safe to hold thousands of skaters at a time, they raised a red ball by the bell tower, just south of the reservoir. The ball is up became code for a skating day and created a great to-do. The city railroad cars also signified skating days by flying white flags with red balls on the end of each vehicle. Some cars falsely displayed flags to attract customers, like what else is new. Many surrounding buildings rented skates and provided fires to warm up by. On the southern side of the main pond, the rude but comfortable casino, run by Charles A. Stetson, owner of luxury hotel The Astor House, sold hot cocoa, beer, and cream soda. For a quarter or less, skaters could also get cakes, fried oysters, clam chowder, pickled tongue, and sandwiches. Other park restaurants catered to a less moneyed clientele. Unsurprisingly, the haves soon backed away from rubbing elbows with the have-nots and suffering the crowds of Central Park. In 1862, they moved to the Fifth Avenue Pond, Manhattan's first private skating pond. Manhattan's first skating pond for the upper classes was opened and operated by Major Oscar Oatman, head of Park Slope's hoity-toity Washington Skating Club, in 1862. Fifth Avenue Pond was one of several in the vicinity and formed from a spring. This pond was fenced with a cloakroom and saloon with warming stoves. Employees constantly swept up debris to keep the ice spotless, and Oatman was also there around the clock. It spanned 11 acres between 59th and 57th Streets and 4th and 5th Avenues. Fifth Avenue Pond, in a hollow shielding it from the wind, had been used for many years by boys, especially ones from the Beekman estate, around 61st Street, between 4th, Today Park, and 5th Avenues. In 1862, Madison Avenue didn't yet cut through the pond. A raised thoroughfare cut through it in 1865, shrinking the pond's size. The pond remained open through 1868. Skating lessons were offered for women and kids, and chairs on large runners were available to those who couldn't and didn't want to learn to skate. By night, limelights, calcium lights, and large reflectors lit up the pond. Each afternoon, a brass band played a range of operatic and national music. They even played in sub-zero temperatures in January 1866. Oatman charged $10 for a season pass, only given to those who could produce so-called quality references. His pond was only for people of so-called character and respectability. The pond opened at 7 a.m. for the many wealthy and fashionable people who had a habit of skating before breakfast. It closed at midnight and wasn't open on Sundays, the only day most normal people had off. And those days, unfortunately, you basically had to work 6 days a week instead of, they didn't have yet the 5-hour workday, and this unfortunately meant a lot of, Jewish immigrants had to, choose between keeping Shabbos or, just not having a job or just, having to do, really more difficult things. It just was, a much different world in so many ways in those days. Skates in that era were long boots coming up as far as the knee, and were often utilitarian colors like brown, black, and tan. Forget about custom dyeing skates to reflect one's personality, or women and girls predominantly wearing the white skates popularized and made de rigueur by Sonia Henney in the 1920s. These old-school custom-made skates cost as much as $50, which would be about $700 today. Dresses ending just above the ankle were considered short, again decades before Sonia Henney made shorter dresses and skirts fashionable and the sports standard. And obviously this was way before women would even consider wearing trousers, either to skate or for any other reason. They would be arrested if they went out in public looking like men. Men wore Scottish wool trousers and chinchilla peacoats, and obviously this was before chinchillas were companion animals. Pets, they were hunted almost to extinction for their pets for use in fur clothing and accessories, and the people who brought chinchillas back from the near extinction were people specifically breeding them to become pets. That's a really interesting story for another time. Every season, Harper's Bazaar gave detailed recommendations for fashionable skating apparel. Outfits included bright colors because dark was deemed too somber, short jackets, fur-trimmed Russian suits, fur muffs, Highland plaids, beribboned caps, calfskin skates with chamois lining, and plumed sealskin tokay hats. HB advised against white undergarments in favor of blue merino stockings. That HB is Harper's Bazaar. This was an era when women had to wear long skirts and dresses on the ice, and could neither wear pants nor shorter skirts and dresses, enabling them to move more freely. And obviously, forget about jumping. They were just, men as well as women were just tracing figures on the ice in that era. Elaborate hairstyles for women were considered bad taste. One of the hairstyles Harper's Bazaar recommended instead was a braided chignon with a crimped tress. Costume balls and carnivals were the highlight of the skating season. These events included fireworks, and many elaborate costumes. During the Civil War, some men dressed as zouaves, a popular regiment with very bright uniforms. Oatman also hosted women's skating matches, which drew many crowds. Not only did the winner get a gold medal, but also all of her competitors. Members of the New York Skating Club were judges. The club, founded in 1863, had its headquarters by Fifth Avenue Pond from 1865 through 68. One of the club's members, champion skater Alexander McMillan, designed an expensive custom skate made of solid iron and steel. After Oatman's pond closed in 1868, due to much nearby construction, as I mentioned, like Manhattan, developed from deep downtown, like in the financial district in the Lower East Side, to what we would consider uptown Manhattan now, and there was a lot of construction going on as the 19th century progressed, although it was still considerably undeveloped even in the late 19th century. We didn't yet have all these apartments and buildings and businesses and such we think about now when we consider the Upper East and West Side and even farther uptown than that. So after this construction, the pond moved to Mitchell's Pond, which is the current site of the Plaza Hotel. This pond too offered live music, contests, and carnivals. It was paved over in 1871 to build the Windsor Hotel. What else is new? Just ripping down old stuff to make room for new stuff, and in particular in such a hugely densely populated city. Unfortunately, that means a lot of the more spacious houses and greenery and buildings and parks and such had to be ripped down so they could cram more people and businesses in there. After Mitchell's Pond closed, patrons moved to McMillan's Pond by 46th Street and Fifth Avenue. As always, the city's elites flocked to it. Yet another move followed upon the heels of construction moving uptown. Artificial rinks began appearing, such as Empire City Skating Rink by 63rd Street and 3rd Avenue in 1868. It boasted hundreds of gas lights, a 70-foot-high arched ceiling, and many refreshment rooms. This era coincided with skating's evolution into a real sport. American ballet dancer Jackson Haynes, who lived from 1840 to 1875, envisioned a style of ice skating beyond the rigid, formal, prim and proper British style popular at the time. Drawing upon his background in ballet, he created artistic, graceful programs accompanied by music. Another of his innovations was, for the very first time, permanently attaching skating blades to boots. Prior, skaters had fastened them with leather straps. With permanently attached blades, skaters gained greater balance and more room to safely jump and spin. Americans and the British hated this new style, so Haynes went to Europe to teach and perform. His style, dubbed the International style, became very popular in Vienna in particular. His Vienna school students created the International Skating Union in 1892, and this organization has been around ever since. Skating fans know all about the drama and politicking with the ISU and various scandals and such over the years. The first European figure skating championships were held in Hamburg in 1891, and in 1896 the first World Figure Skating Championships were held in St. Petersburg. The sport came to the Olympics in 1908 in London. Since the Winter Olympics didn't exist yet, ice skating was part of the Summer Games, believe it or not. At the time, there were 4 divisions, but not the ones we know today. They had men's singles, ladies' singles. They are still officially in all the literature and the names that, by the way, they're called ladies and still not called women's figure skating, which I know seems kind of sexist and the product of a prior era, but that's just how some things are. So obviously you have to call it its proper official name, ladies skating, not women's skating, even if you personally feel like I do. It should have been renamed women's skating long ago. They also had pair skating and special figures. The lattermost involved figures far more elaborate than the now discontinued compulsory school figures portion of competition, and I'll be inserting some pictures of these lovely figures people used to trace on the ice. It's really a shame this part of figure skating seems to have largely gone by the wayside. People just focus on all these freaking quads instead of its actual origins. Figure skating, drawing figures on the ice and just being really pretty and artistic and not solely about athletics. These beautiful artistic figures dominated the sport at the time. Even after the international style soon rose to prominence, a more athletic aspect quickly emerged. Swedish skater Ulrich Salchow, after whom a jump was named, winner of 23 gold medals, 3 silvers, and 1 bronze from the Olympics, World Championships, European Championships, and Swedish Championships, developed slightly serrated blades, enabling the launching of long jumps. Norwegian figure and speed skater Axel Paulson lived from 1855 through 1938, invented the axle in 1882. The Lutz was invented by Austrian Alois Lutz in 1913, and the loop, also called the Rittberger, was invented by German Werner Rittberger in 1910. American Bruce Mapes invented the toe loop in 1920, and there are also several other different types of jumps, including mostly like I guess you would call them like baby jumps or practice like beginner jumps that aren't really done in competitions. They're more like, for kids learning to skate or people like just doing it for fun and not serious about like competitions or professional skating. In the early days, women who did jumps were reprimanded for their so-called unladylike behavior. Skates remained mid-calf length, and women continued wearing long, bulky skirts and dresses. Men competed in suits and ties, which is, total like sea change from how it is today with all these, fancy schmancy outfits. And like if a man does, wear a necktie with his thing, it's generally not like commonly done. And I don't even know if it's like a real necktie, just like something like showy looking like a necktie to go with his, like the fabric and the style of the thing he's wearing, not like, a full like 5-piece suit on the ice. One of the first indoor skating rinks was the Boston Arena, built in 1909. Organized public skating came to Boston in the mid-19th century by Frog Pond in Boston Commons, which is a large historic park, and if you've never been there, I do recommend it. It's lovely. Like women jumping, pair skating too was originally considered scandalous and or taboo by certain countries and people, since it involves very personal contact between a man and woman who often aren't related. And I know many skating fans, they like really get happy when they find out about like pair skaters or ice dancers who are together in real life or who like get together after they've been paired. They just have, these romantic like fantasies and ideas because many of the programs they do on the ice are so like, romantic and erotic, and they want to believe they're like a couple in real life too, and they're not really like faking all these emotions. But like plenty of the pair skaters and ice dancers are like married to or dating other people in real life, so they're just doing really good acting on the ice, and they just see their like skating partner as like a business or working sports partner, not someone they really want to do these like romantic and erotic things with when they're not on the ice. Skating rose to new athletic heights with the advent of Norwegian Sonja Henie. Though she still wore high skating boots, her skirts were much shorter than previously deemed appropriate, and her skates were white. She also showed the world female skaters could be true sportswomen, instead of just gracefully tracing pretty figures on the ice. Although obviously by modern standards, like Sonja Henie's style of skating and jumping would be considered really old school and conservative because, she wasn't even doing like triple jumps or anything like that. Today, almost all female skaters wear white skates, sometimes beige or tan, or at least if they're like doing it like professionally for the Olympics. Obviously, if you're just doing it on your own for your own personal enjoyment, you can like, custom dye them like purple or something, or dye the laces like lemon yellow or bronze or something. And I know a lot of artsy people, they do like patterns on their skates and they like fill them in with paint, or they just like paint their own designs on the skates. Like for example, I've seen a lot of like Christmas themed skates or floral designs, or just something fun and cute to reflect the skater's personality. And obviously if you're not competing professionally, you don't need to worry about meeting a so-called like dress code with skates that have to look exactly a certain way. You can just have as much fun with like decorating and painting them as you want when you're not being held accountable to a higher like sports governing body. Men wear black skates traditionally also, and obviously if you're not competing professionally, you can also have as much fun with your skates as you want, whether you're male or female. Proud tomboy I am, I'm going to get a pair of black skates when I'm back in an area with real skating rinks, and now that I have thankfully lost 75 pounds and I'm no longer practically morbidly obese, I'm in a much better position to get back into ice skating and do like jumps and more athletic moves. But because I have some metal hardware in my left leg due to a bunch of like leg surgeries, and I had a severely broken fibula and tibia, I would need to only land jumps on my left foot because my right foot, I cannot put any like weight through it or like sudden like just jumping on it like that. I have to do like all the good like stuff through my left foot just because of the nature of my injury, and I just can't afford to like hurt the metal hardware in my right leg. There were 12 compulsory figures till 1947, after which it changed to 6 due to time constraints and number of competitors. They represented 60% of the total score until 1968, when it changed to 50%. In 1973, the compulsories were shortened from 6 to 3, and the short program was added because this was a reflection of, skaters who weren't really good at doing the compulsories, but they were like fantastic in the actual skating. Like, for example, I believe the skater from, I think she's American, Janet Lynn. She was brilliant. Unfortunately, never won an Olympic medal because she just kind of sucked at school figures, but she was much more brilliant in the long skating, and so obviously they changed the rules like to reflect that, many skaters were just leaning more towards the artistic and athletic side, and they just didn't excel in the school figures. It's just, skating gradually evolves over time as, things change. Also in 1973, compulsories were down to 40% of the total score. In 1988, they became 20% and were discontinued in 1990, and there's a whole, discussion for another thing, but, there are many, throughout the Olympics history, if the compulsories hadn't been part of the, required scores and the elements they had to do, certain people would not have won the gold medal, and other people would have won the gold medal, or at least been on the podium, because some gold medalists were brilliant at school figures, but they weren't necessarily the strongest free skaters, while other people who were pretty terrible at the school figures were much more brilliant when they were doing the free skate. Well, I do believe it's kind of like a shame that they were completely discontinued. Maybe still keep them out of the competition or do only a small percent, but skaters in the old days who had to do all these figures, they had better control of their edges and better overall jumping technique because they had that basic training and what they had to do. Indoor competitions became the rule in 1968. Costumes for both sexes also became more artistic. Ice dancing became a world championship event in 1952 and was added to the Olympics in 1976 after appearing as a demo sport in 1968. Today, skating is a far cry from the winter scenes on frozen ponds of yore. Neither the medieval Dutch nor Manhattan's 19th century elite would recognize it as the same winter sport they so loved. Even the scoring system is different. And by the way, the blog post which I published today on February 7th, 2022 is all about, my thoughts on the scoring system, the old 6.0 system, which I still prefer and wish we hadn't completely ditched, and the current code of points system, which, still allows for politicking, behind the scenes and ridiculously overinflated grades of execution, which, kind of is the reason, a lot of, Russian teen girls have been, sweeping all these podiums at all these events. But, obviously that's a much different, off-topic thing for another day. I could, just talk about this, for a really much longer time. So, thank you very much for listening. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing, and hitting the notification bell so you get notified when my new videos post. And I'm really hoping to build up my subscribers over this year, hopefully getting to 100 by the end of the year, and possibly my next post will be on Wednesday. Might be I'm doing one of my a video form of one of my Dantean blog posts, again possibly the one that just gives a general historic overview of the Divine Comedy itself, the history of publication and printing and the writing process, and a general overview of all 3 canticles. So it'll be I guess shorter and less intense than this video. So again, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys again very soon. Thanks. Bye.